called Learn and Play Party Friends. Give me one moment. My computer's reminding me we're recording. So I have a small business called Learn and Play Party Friends, which is basically a play-based educational party service. And recently, it's over the past year or so, it's been morphing into an educational supportive service for children and for families, parents, for those in the community, for those in public schooling, and definitely with homeschoolings. I'm also a homeschool mom. So, hey, everybody that's coming in from the homeschool community. I've been posting pretty much everywhere on every New York City website and with NYCHIA. And last year, I wanted to do an assignment. An assignment with my children, with my niece and my nephew, and a few other kids that we've connected with in the homeschool community, and helping them build their research skills, helping them develop their public speaking skills. And this was a great opportunity for us to be able to learn about ecosystems and how to support our ecosystems. We did a great butterfly project, and I'll share it with you next week. And we had an opportunity to release them at Concrete Plant Park. And I just hope that you guys learn a lot from Chrissy, learn a lot from everyone that's going to be here within this particular, with every single session that we're going to have together. And let's raise some butterflies this year.
Yes, thank you so much, Talima, for being, really the catalyst for this whole entire series. And thank you, Chrissy, for being a part of today. And really, this is perfect timing to introduce yourself and share with us what we're going to be learning today.
Okay, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Once again, good morning. I'm glad we're all here together. I'm thrilled to be collaborating with Nathan and Talima on this pollinator series. It's so exciting because it's springtime. Yay! So what a better time. There's no better time than springtime to talk about pollinators. And in order to talk about pollinators, I want to just tell you about a couple of groups that I participate in that really work to support pollinators. The Butterfly Project New York City, as well as the New York City Pollinator Working Group. Butterfly Project New York City is a grassroots coalition of organizations, including Green Thumb of the Parks Department, Grow NYC, New York City Wildflower Week, and particularly the New York Botanical Gardens Bronx Green Up Program. And of course, today, Bronx River Alliance. Thank you so much. Pollinator Working Group is a group of individuals. It's getting bigger and bigger all the time. NewYorkCityPollinators.org is that website if you want to check that out. But there's lots of ways to support pollinators. And the best way probably is to start to learn about them. So we are very excited today to start that journey. Oh, so let's start with this question then. Raise your hand if you think you know the answer to this question. What is pollination? All right. Nathan, would you like to launch that poll? Whoop, whoop.
So you all should see a poll up on your screen right now. And the question is, what is pollination?
I think we might have had a mistake though, because it says single choice. Oh, people are doing it. Okay, good.
If you're having some trouble, you can also just drop in the chat.
Oh yeah, I'm confused. I don't, okay.
Yeah, on mine it says single choice for some reason, but some people must have multiple choice because they're answering. But nonetheless, it's really, this is just a fun way for us to start this conversation, right? And I think we're about done. I've got 100% of people have responded, and we had 4 possible responses: sexual reproduction of plants, and that's scientific, folks. Transfer of pollen from one plant to another by pollinators. One main reason many of Earth's trees and other plants are actually in existence today, or all of the above. And the all of the above folks win. All right, because pollinators support the process of creating habitat, and they definitely transfer pollen, and they enable the reproduction of plants through the production of seeds in plants. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. And there's our bumblebee on milkweed. Okay, so now that we know what pollination is, or some part of pollination, let's talk about the pollinators. That's why we're here today. On this blazing star flower right here, we have two pollinators. It's hard to see. Silver spotted skipper, and up on the top left, there's a tiny little pollinator there too. I just noticed that one for the first time. All right, so butterflies. We start with our butterflies. Are butterflies our strongest pollinators? No, but they are probably the best ambassadors of pollination because of their size and beauty. They are some of our largest and showiest pollinators, and they are both specialists and generalists. Okay, now, specialists and generalists, those are funny terms. A specialist pollinator is one that loves one plant for a number of given reasons, right? Our monarch butterfly here loves milkweed plants. Why? Because it's the only plant that the babies of the monarch butterfly can survive on. They must eat milkweed to grow. So the monarch butterfly is a specialist when it comes to laying eggs. It can forage on all different kinds of plants, as you can see here. Generalists are those that can do all kinds of plants. They're not worried about which ones they go to get nectar, but they still might have specifics when it comes to laying their eggs. All right, let's go on and get a look at some of these wonderful butterflies. Here's our black swallowtail. I've included the caterpillars so that you can see the difference between the adult on the left and the larva on the right. Okay, larva or caterpillar of the black swallowtail. These are wonderful, and if you plant dill or other kinds of herbs in your garden, you'll attract these. Here's our eastern tiger swallowtail. Check out those caterpillars. They look so different, don't they? But they are actually the same butterfly caterpillar. The one on the top right is a younger, what's called an instar of the caterpillar. This one on the bottom right is the final instar of the caterpillar. That means that caterpillar shed its skin, right? And then the next time it became green like that. These are called adaptations, everybody. Very interesting. This top one looks like a bird dropping if you see it in nature, believe it or not. Yeah, that's camouflage, everybody. Pretty interesting, right? Here's our painted lady. Look at those wonderful yellow stripes and those spiky things, right? Another type of adaptation, right? What do those spiky things make you think of? Do you want to pick up that caterpillar with those spiky things on there? Not me. All right, there's our painted lady on echinacea. Here is our mourning cloak. Once again, kind of a scary looking caterpillar with spiky things on there, right? Let me just cruise through here and make sure I'm not missing my notes. Here's our painted lady. All right. Here's our red Admiral butterfly. Once again, the caterpillar tries to make itself look very scary. And here's our monarch with the caterpillar. And that is a mature caterpillar that's already gone through all of its instars. And you can see that the monarch butterfly, the adult, as well as the caterpillar are both on milkweed, a very important plant, 4-inch wingspan, right? So that means that this butterfly gets really nice and big. Raise your hand if you've seen a monarch butterfly before. And yes, me too. And I wanted to also show this. This is thanks to our friend Dina, who works at the New Roots Community Farm. She actually photographed this chrysalis. So this is the third stage in the metamorphosis of this butterfly, right? And once the butterfly comes out of this chrysalis, which is right in the middle, it's going to look like it does on the right-hand side there. very different forms, right? And all of these butterflies can boast the same thing. And finally, our little cabbage white. Have to include this one because if you're a gardener and you grow greens like collards, cabbage, this guy might be your enemy. I don't know. But this one loves to eat the leaves of those types of plants. And it is actually an agricultural species. It was imported here from Europe. And but the best way to get rid of it is just to knock those eggs right off the leaves. You got to look on the back. All right, moths. Let's move on to the next group. Now, moths look a lot like butterflies, right? Nod your head or shake no. What do you think when you look at these moths? Well, that's because they are basically the same. They have some adaptations that are different, but they are still in the order Lepidoptera, okay? Butterflies and moths are basically in the same group. They are classified the same, but they have some different adaptations. And so these we call moths. They are poorly understood because most of them fly at night. Not all of them. We're going to see some that fly during the day, but most fly at night. And so they are much less studied. They far outnumber the butterflies. Okay, many, many more species of moths than there are butterflies. They win the prize on that. And most of them are specialists. Most of them choose one plant only to lay their eggs on, right? And how can we tell the difference? Let's move on. Let's see if we can figure this out. Here we have our sycamore tussock moth. I knew I would remember that. Here's our sycamore tussock moth, and you can see those caterpillars on the left. So often moth caterpillars are fuzzy like this. This is a very common adaptation. And if we keep on moving on to our Cecropia moth here, take a look at those antennae at the top of the Cecropia moth. Can you tell that those are kind of feathery looking antennae? Well, that's what makes a moth a moth. I mean, not really. There's lots of other things that make it a moth, but moth antennae are very different from butterfly antennae, and that's the quickest way for us to tell them apart. Moths have these feathery antennae that are broader, and butterflies have very straight antennae with a little club at the top, okay? And I really wanted to show this caterpillar here because doesn't that look like a wonderful toy with all of those primary colors there? Don't you want to play with that guy? I think you probably could. I don't think that one's poisonous. And here's some of our day flying moths. Now, we said most moths fly at night, and that is the idea that most people have, right? But some moths actually do fly during the day. And these guys are two wonderful examples. I'm getting to my notes on that. The one on the left is actually a clear wing hummingbird moth. So when you see that guy out in nature, which you're going to now, by the way, everybody, I've noticed this phenomenon in life that when you become aware of something, like you've seen a picture and like all of a sudden like, oh, now I know what a hummingbird moth is. I start to see them. You're going to see this guy this summer, I bet you. So the clear wing hummingbird moth actually has clear patches on the wing. You can see the green right through there, right? The guy on the right is called an Arcigera flower moth. Pretty rare, that one. That was quite a find for me to see that guy who just hung out there and let me take its picture. I was like, wow, what are you doing? So there we go. Day flying moths. Most of them are night flying, but there's still plenty of day flying moths. They are butterflies basically, but they are adapted differently. So we call them moths, right? They're in the Lepidoptera order. And let's go ahead and move on. Bees. Okay, bees. Now we're getting into something that's near and dear to our hearts, right? Because our bees, there's many of them, first of all, approximately 4,000 species in North America. And there are over 300 species in New York City as of the last count that was done, probably more than that. And this is why they're near and dear to our heart, because they win the prize for the most effective pollination, right? Bumblebees in particular, which are pictured here, have the ability to do something called buzz pollination, which means that they get their whole bodies moving inside the flower in order to really shake out that pollen. Believe it or not, folks, tomatoes depend upon buzz pollination. So support your honeybees if you love tomatoes. I bet you some of you don't love tomatoes yet, but you might later, I bet you. So our bees are, believe it or not, mostly individual. We're going to talk about honeybees in a minute, which are communal nesters, but most of our bees are non-communal. That means they nest alone. They raise their babies alone. Okay. And they need nesting cavities in the soil, in hollow twigs, and other holes that they find throughout the environment. So we need to support them in these ways. If we can leave a little bit of soil or some cut plant stems that are hollow for them. And so here's just some wonderful pictures of some bees that are different from the ones that we're so used to seeing, right? When we think bee, we think, oh, honeybee, right? But there are a lot of other bees. Like I said, approximately 4,000 species in North America alone, not to mention all the ones around the world. So this is one of our halictid bees. Okay, this emerald green guy. Look at that eye. Isn't that amazing? And look at all the pollen all over those legs. This is why they win the prize, right? The pollen. Here is a couple of masked bees, and they're on St. John's wort there. And that was actually right next to my house. I was so thrilled. They hung out, let me take their picture. Here is a leaf cutter bee. This is called a flat-tailed leaf cutter bee that is pollinating milkweed. Okay, and I caught that guy in flight, so thrilled. And this guy right here was doing me a big favor. Does anybody recognize that plant? That's my cucumber plant, guys. And that two-spotted, let me remember what that guy is called. Two-spotted longhorn bee was pollinating my cucumbers. Thank you, because I got a lot of cucumbers last year. Yes. Yeah, whenever you eat some yummy fruit or vegetable like a cucumber, thank a pollinator. All right, and honeybees. We love our honeybees, and we are definitely surrounded by them. We have lots and lots of honeybees, but there's something to know about honeybees. The US Department of Agriculture considers these guys livestock, believe it or not, just like our horses and other kinds of livestock, because these guys work for us. Honeybees are actually imported from other countries and transported around our country in order to pollinate our crops for us. And so they are considered livestock, and they definitely work hard for human beings. Okay. They can sometimes come in competition with our other bees. And that's why it's so important for us to think about really planting a lot of flowers. We need enough flowers for all of our bees. And that means millions, folks. So if you're thinking about planting some flowers for your pollinators this summer, you're doing great. All right, our next group of pollinators is one that can be very misunderstood: the wasps. Raise your hand if you're afraid of wasps. Did people raise their hand? Oh, okay, thank you. Yes, and this is why I really wanted to include quite a few wasps in this presentation, because we know there are several thousand of them in New York State. I couldn't find a count for New York City. And we know they are much less studied than bees and are probably misunderstood. All right, just like some of the others that we're going to look at later. But this little guy that you're seeing right here is only less, about 3/4 of an inch long. This is what's called a mason bee. Actually, no, sorry, I'm on the wrong one. This is a mason wasp. Sorry, mason wasp. And it is pretty harmless, this little guy, as are most of our wasps. Just like the bees, they can either be social or communal nesters like the honeybees. And an example is paper wasps. I bet you've seen one of those gray things hanging in a tree, right? That's a paper wasp nest. And those are social nesters, but most of our wasps, the great majority, are individual nesters. And we're going to take a look at some of those. But I wanted to show this guy first. First of all, look at that. He's actually waving at us, or she. I don't know, I can't tell. And this is one of the reasons why. And can you see what that crazy gal is doing there? Maybe this is a she. She's in a bagel. Isn't that right? I know, that cracked me up. She's in a bagel. This is a yellow jacket. And believe it or not, yellow jackets are meat eaters and bread eaters and all kinds of others, right? They are not pollinators like our other bees. Instead, they have adapted to be able to forage on other types of food, especially human food. And that's why at our picnics, how many of you have ever been holding your drink? Iced tea, Coca-Cola, and here comes that yellow jacket. And you're like, OMG, can you please leave me alone? Right? But that guy is not leaving you alone. And we can be worried about these guys because they sting, and they sting multiple times. And so we want to protect ourselves. They are ground nesters, but they're communal nesters. So more than one in that nest, right? But this one little species, although there are multiple species of yellow jackets, but this one group strikes fear in all of us. And yet there are thousands of other bees. This little guy, for example, is called a braconid wasp. And you can't tell from this picture, but it's about 1/8 of an inch long. It's tiny, and it does not have a stinger. This little thing poking out the back there is actually the way that it lays its eggs. It's called an ovipositor. It's not a stinger. And this guy is perfectly harmless and an excellent pollinator. Here is our golden digger wasp. I wanted to show you this because you can see the example of her nest that she's made in the sand there. Okay, she's actually larger. She's a little over 1 inch long. She's beautiful. When you see one in wasp, you can see the glory of her colors, but she is extremely shy. Like most wasps and bees, the only way this gal is going to sting you is if you pick her up. Please don't pick her up. Yeah, leave her alone and she will definitely leave you alone. Golden digger wasp. They're gorgeous. This is one of my favorites that I see every year. This is called the two-spotted scallid wasp. And this wasp is pollinating white snake root, which is a wonderful plant. And just to look at the glory of that pattern and those colors, and the wings are actually blue. I wish we could see them a little better in this photo, but you can see a little bit of the blue. And so we can actually enjoy these creatures, not just for their pollination services, but also for the beauty that they add to our environment, right? Once again, this is a very shy wasp. She is never going to attack you. She is not interested in that, right? Unless you grab her. Don't do that. She does have a stinger. Okay. Oh, God, I jumped right over to the beetles there. So I'm going to just jump back here and make a little recap on the wasps. Many species of wasps, awesome pollinators, most of them not interested in stinging you. If you stay away from them, they'll stay away from you. And excellent pollinators, so we should definitely applaud them and thank them. All right, now we can jump into the beetles. And this is, of course, another one of my favorite groups. Well, they're all my favorite, what can I say? But these guys are also misunderstood. Often, they're more studied. Thankfully, science has really taken a close look at beetles and studied them. They're one of the the oldest groups of insects in an evolutionary sense. They've been around longer than our other flying insects in terms of evolution. What I think is most interesting about these guys is that they're really private. It's hard to find them. But if you go looking around like we did for this guy out in our garden in Queens, you can definitely find them. They also kind of look a little scary, right? But as you can tell, we're holding this grapevine beetle and he is not worried at all. Well, I mean, he might be saying like, oh, okay, human being, can I please go back to my business? But otherwise, not biting us, you know, and it feels so fun when you've got them. So if you find a beetle out there, as long as they don't have mandibles, some beetles have long mandibles, avoid those because those can't pinch you. But if you don't see any mandibles, pick one up and see how it feels. They're so much fun. They have a hard casing on top. You can see this exoskeleton. You can see on top of the bottom left picture, you can see the outer part. Those two wing cases actually open up, kind of like a Tesla. You've seen the way the Tesla, you know, the doors open sideways like that. And then the wings pop out and this guy can fly away. Grapevine beetle. More species than any other pollinators around the world. And that's probably because they've been evolving for millions of years. They take many different forms and we're going to see a few. Some are pollinators and others are predators, and we'll take a look. All right, here are some pollinators. Hardly can tell they're even beetles, but these are magnolia flower beetles, and they are pollinating. They're tiny little beetles that are pollinating a really big flower, that magnolia flower. And these little green guys who, to tell you the truth, I couldn't figure out what they are. I tried. They look like click beetles to me, but I couldn't find them. But nonetheless, they are pollinating our evening primrose, which is a common plant that we'll see by roadsides and in our gardens, blooms at night. So, and beetles, some beetles will forage at night, but it looks like these guys are pollinating during the day, right? And I want to point out once again, look at the color on those guys. Look at that emerald green color, really bringing in some gorgeousness to our environment, right? And here is a fire beetle pollinating a rose. And I just wanted to point out the difference here. This guy is considered a longhorn beetle. And if you can see that antennae that's sticking up there, that's what makes it a longhorn beetle. Longhorn beetles have these super long antennae. Okay, doing a great job pollinating for us there. And I mentioned some beetles are not pollinators, but instead they are predators. And the lady beetle I wanted to particularly highlight because the lady beetle is a predator. We depend on that lady beetle to help keep balance in our gardens because she eats things like aphids. And if aphids grow too much in our garden, there's too many of them, they attack our plants and can kind of put a hurting on our plants. But if you've got plenty of lady beetles, that's not going to happen. So support our lady beetles to support our plants, and those plants in turn support our pollinators, right? Everything is connected in nature and in the garden. We have some other pollinators, and you might not expect it. You might not expect that flies are pollinators. Are they our strongest pollinators? No, but that's okay because nonetheless, they do the job and they do it in many different forms. Now, put it in the chat. What do you think this guy looks like? Does it look like a fly? Does it look like a bee? Does it look like a wasp? Let me know. Okay. And then I'll tell you, I'll pause for just a second. I think I've given it away already with the slide, but this guy is a fly, not a bee, but it's trying to make itself look like a bee. It's a mimid, right? There are many mimics or mimids in nature that try to make themselves look like one thing so that they can scare you away. But this guy is perfectly harmless. Absolutely no ability to sting or bite. There are more species than the other pollinators, except the beetles. They are the second most. They have many different crazy adaptations and shapes, just like this hover fly. They're also called flower flies, okay? And what is the one thing, everybody, that tells you that it's a fly? When you're looking at this picture, what do you think it is? Infinity? Did I pronounce that correctly?
No, infinite, but you were close. We'll get there. No.
Yeah.
So, okay, to me, it's the eyes and the wings give me fly. Everything else is B, to be honest.
Ding, 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 ding. Absolutely. The wings are a little more subtle, a little more difficult to tell the difference, but those eyes, no way. Fly eyes are fly eyes. Exactly. Somebody reminded me the other day what the fly eyes, compound eyes. They're called compound eyes. Amazing. Okay. Some are pollinators and some are predators. And I gave some examples of both. This guy, there you have it. Once again, there's those fly eyes. This is our black-shouldered drone fly pollinating goldenrod for us. Thank you, drone fly. And wonderful eyes, by the way. This is our green bottle fly. I had to search around for this picture. Pollinating a type of coneflower. And look at the wonderful colors. This guy's about this big and kind of looks like a housefly, right? The houseflies are the darker ones, though. They don't have those amazing colors, that greeny blue and the red eyes. Pollinating away there. And I mentioned some of our flies are not pollinators. Instead, they are predators in the garden, and they are beneficial predators. Okay, although they might not be so choosy. They probably can prey on some of our bees too. But you can see this robber fly. This guy is called a robber fly, and they fly and catch other insects in flight and then land and make a feast of them. You can see this guy is a cannibal with another fly in its limbs there, I guess. All right, so flies, a little less strong on pollination because of their adaptations and their sizes often, but nonetheless, they're doing the job. They're pollinating for us. They come in many different shapes, sizes, colors, adaptations, and they can either be pollinators or predators. Either way, they are serving us in our natural landscapes and our gardens. And we call those, by the way, everybody, ecosystem services. They are providing ecosystem services. And so is this fellow right here. Actually, this is a gal. This one I can tell is a female. This is our only bird pollinator in the Northeast, or the the eastern part of the United States. This is the ruby-throated hummingbird. She is pollinating what is called cardinal flower here. And the reason that I know that it's a female, by the way, is because she's all kind of a dull green. The male has a very bright purplish collar here on the neck. But you can see these birds, the ruby-throated hummingbird, but they are vulnerable in New York City, and that's a habitat issue, right? So if you plant more plants that will attract them, they may spend more time here, and even we'll see more of them. They pollinate tubular flowers such as American honeysuckle, cardinal flower, and bee balm, which is a very common plant in our gardens. All right. So how do pollinators impact our lives? I can see I need to move on. Well, they do a number of things that we've been talking about all along, right? So, and our planet, I should add, excuse me. These guys are helping us to create habitat. Remember what we said about pollination at the beginning of our presentation today, okay? Pollination transfers pollen from one plant to another, which is a part of the process of reproduction. And that is, the end result of that is the production of seeds for our plants. And those seeds are going to be dispersed and allow more plants to grow. And that is how habitat continues over time, right? So the pollinators, now some plants are not pollinated by animals. Some plants are wind pollinated, and I'm sure you're going to study that at some point, but many of our plants are pollinated by insects. Okay. Secondly, they pollinate food crops, many of them. Think strawberries, apples, cucumbers, squashes, and many, many more. If you like any of those things, think a pollinator today and every day, right? And in the end, our insects and other wildlife as well let us know, they indicate to us the quality of our air, our water, and our soil, right? If we have lots of healthy pollinators in the environment, that means that they're able to live in using our water, using our soil, and breathing air, just like us human beings, right? So lots and lots of reasons why we want to support pollinators, because they support us. Okay, let's consider what they need. And thankfully, this series is going to touch upon these things in the upcoming weeks. But if you want to encourage pollinators, plant a diversity of plants, especially those that are locally evolved. Provide nest and egg laying sites, some tree cavities, bare soil, host plants, right? Host plants. Those are the ones that our insect pollinators lay their eggs on. Okay, so we have an example here of these coneflowers and the bee balm in the background. Those are all going to be used at some point by insects to lay their eggs on. And their caterpillars, once they hatch from the egg, are going to then eat those leaves and grow up and become adults and continue that process. And make sure that you're providing places to shelter and overwinter. What does that mean? What that means is don't clean up your garden too much, please. Okay, leave your plants standing until the following spring if you can. If you got to cut them, leave the stems laying on the ground because they probably have insects in them. Leave them standing all winter if you can. If you can't, then lay the stems on the ground so that those insects can overwinter and come out in the springtime. If you also want to really consider our pollinators, here's a great example, just like the last one, I would say, of diversity in the landscape, right? So we have short plants, medium plants, and tall plants. And that's what all of our wildlife like, not just the insects, but also the birds and mammals. I'm going to skip this one for today because I think we're needing to move on. Get out and do some gardening because that's where you meet the pollinators. These City Parks Foundation interns, these cool dudes were out actually helping to plant some plants in the fall and meeting pollinators at the same time. That grapevine beetle, that was one of our interns that found that beetle, by the way, a young man, and I think he was in 11th grade. Here's our garden once it started to mature with some asters and goldenrod in the fall. And oh, just a note, try to keep these guys at bay if you can. These are our problematic plants. I'll say one thing about them. They want to live alone. They don't want to share with any other plants. So we got to keep them at bay so that they don't take over the landscape, because more plants is always better. That's biodiversity. All right, questions and comments. I'm going to stop sharing. Let's get to those questions.
But first, if we could just get everyone to a big round of applause. Thank you so much, Chrissy, for introducing us to all of these wonderful insects.
Thank you.
Yay.
Yay.
All right. So I see a couple hands are raised. And I did see a question that came into the chat that I want to bring to the surface. It's cool. I'm going to start with that one. And then Infinite, if you want to go next, that's great. So someone who called in from the iPhone was asking the question about the sycamore moth. They were curious if they got the name sycamore moth from the tree or where the name came from.
Yeah, really excellent question. And yes, so we talked a couple of times, or I mentioned a couple of times in the presentation that some of our pollinators are specialists. The sycamore tussock moth is a specialist. So the moth lays her eggs on the sycamore tree somewhere. And when those eggs hatch, the caterpillars will feed on the sycamore leaves. And so that is where that name comes from. And you can raise, they're here. We have a lot of sycamores in the Bronx and throughout New York City. So if you find a sycamore tussock moth, you can bring it in and raise it inside. And you just need a lot of sycamore leaves for that guy, right? So, and you saw the two adaptations, the two colors, which I find really wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And for folks that might not remember the two colors, this is a recording and folks can review it later to kind of hone your skills. Infinite, I know you had your hand up, and Leo, I see your hands up next. So we'll go to you after Infinite.
The funny thing is I have all my notes and now I'm like, where did I just write all these notes in? But because I was just going in. I'm like, where's all my questions? So I'm going to remember them. So the first thing was when you first saw, it was an amazing presentation. I'm so happy. Thank you so much. I get really
thank you.
By the process of learning. So thank you for bringing us all in. So when it comes to, you mentioned when you were going through beetles and you said this is the lady beetle. Was that a ladybug?
Yes, exactly. So
okay, so you hurt my feelings because they're my favorite. And I'm like, wait, no. What does she mean lady beetle? It's a ladybug. Like, okay.
And I grew up calling them ladybugs too. I make the distinction so that we all understand that that is a beetle.
Wow.
And so adapted just like a beetle with that hard covering on the outside and the behavior is a beetle type behavior for a predator beetle.
So when you mention, okay, so there's like 3 questions and I'm sorry for being long-winded, you guys. So when you mention, okay, so the second part to me, because when you said that they're not pollinators, I naturally went into, but I know that the process of pollination can happen in different ways. Like even us as humans, if we're traveling with, you know, pollen on our sneakers and we go to like, so we all kind of support the process. So when you went to mention, when you said that some moths, I don't know if it was the moths or the beetles, when you said some are not pollinators as well, I just wanted to understand. So when we say the process of pollination, how do we distinct like what the wind does in the process and what we as humans, like our role in the process? How do we categorize that or explain that?
Well, I'm going to go back to the idea of the ladybug, right? And the ladybug definitely hangs around flowers. And so we ask ourselves, well, why not pollinating then? The pollinators are doing us a big favor, and all of nature a big favor, but they're not doing it out of the kindness of their hearts. They're doing it because they eat pollen. And that's the reason why they're going into those flowers. They eat pollen and they drink nectar from flowers. And so inadvertently, they are catching pollen and actually transferring it. Now, over time, evolution has made them really excellent at that. So there's got to be something in there that gives them lots of how shall I say, benefit, right? And we know that bumblebees, honeybees feed pollen to their young. And so many of them do. So there's an added benefit there, right? So they're going to adapt to becoming really good at catching that pollen, but it's not just for pollination purposes. Now,
so it's an exchange.
Say that again, please.
So it's an exchange between them and nature. Like, so they're there to eat.
Exactly. It's a mutual, what's called a mutualistic relationship. Now, there are scientists who believe that human beings, you mentioned humans as well as wind. Wind is really, some plants have just adapted to being wind pollinated, mostly trees, but lots of grasses. And I can't really speak on that one. I'm not an expert on pollination, but when it comes to humans, there are scientists who believe that we also have relationships with plants. We are especially spreading seeds more than pollen, but it's likely that we also, through our activities, are inadvertently spreading some pollen in the.
We sure are. I agree. So I have one last one, and it's just should be easy. So the last thing that I heard you mention that I was curious about is when you said that when it comes to winter, how to like maintain, well, how to not overly maintain the space so that we still have like space, like I guess space for eggs. So then I'm like, okay, if we're foraging, then how do we recognize and identify? Like, because I love to go to CPP and forage. So it's like, if I'm going to go and I want to forage some medicinal herbs, how do I now go with this mindset of, let me identify if there's some eggs resting on a echinacea, I don't want to touch that echinacea. So how do I support the process? How do we identify?
I'm grateful that you brought that back up, because really one of the issues that we have with our insects around the world is that humans have become really efficient at cleaning up our gardens, right? And we want to try to get a little messier in there, because that's what insects and other animals need, is a little bit, we need to leave things. We need to leave the leaves on the ground, because many insects will drop into the leaf litter. But when it comes to you know, what you mentioned regarding foraging, you know, based on the guidelines of wherever you are, forage away, just take a good look at things before you take them away, right? And I totally agree with you. If you spot something that has eggs on it, it's gonna, unless you have a lot of familiarity with the insects in that area, or you've been studying them already, you likely won't know what they are. And it's, for eggs in particular, it's hard to figure out what they are. And so my rule of thumb is leave them, just leave them there, right? And take the leaves from the other part of the plant, or
Okay.
yeah. And you know, if you want your garden to look a little tidier, and you need to do that in the fall, you know, cut your plants so that the stems are left up. And once again, lay those stems around the base of the plant. That's great for the soil, first of all. And it also leaves any insect eggs, larvae, or adults there in place to overwinter. Our insects overwinter based on their own adaptations in all three forms, either as eggs, caterpillars, or adults.
Wow, those were some great questions. Thank you, Chrissy, for those
Thank you,
answers.
Chrissy. Yeah, you were on point.
We could maybe get to Leo's question. I think Leo had, yeah. Hey, Leo.
Hi. I was just wondering, what is your favorite type of bug?
Oh, that is a hard question, man. That's like asking me what my favorite song is. I can never really land on it. Leo, I have so many that are my favorites. It's really, really hard for me to say. Yeah. Yeah, I would say, if you asked me what's your favorite type of animal, because insects are in the animal kingdom, I might say insects, although it would be a toss up with birds too, because I really love birds and they eat insects. So we need a lot of insects for the birds. Good question.
Oh, just a chain reaction, I guess.
That's right. That's right. Everything's connected in nature. Totally. Chain reactions all over the place. I'm with you.
My favorite bug's the caterpillar.
There's so many and they're so cool. I'm glad you got to see a few today.
Awesome. Any last questions, like burning in your soul? Talima, you got a question?
Yes, and so glad to have you with us, Chrissy. Awesome. Yeah, in your presentation.
Thank you.
Again. So you were talking about, you had mentioned that we could find some eggs on the sycamore trees. So that was the burning question I have. Nathan is definitely in that area. So if we wanted to look for the eggs or the caterpillars that are coming out now in the spring, like what would be that process in the urban environments? Where would we go? What would we do if we found them, and how to find them?
Yeah, I tell you, it is definitely a, you gotta really be patient, I think what it is, and be willing to look everywhere, right?
Wow.
And so the eggs of the tussock moth are probably going to be pretty hard to find, because they're probably going to be way up in the tree.
Exactly.
Yes. for some reason, the caterpillars will scoot down the tree. And so I found those guys, I think on, was that my picture? No, I don't think that was mine actually, but I have seen them, and they'll be on the trunk of the tree. And so looking in the trunks of trees, if the bark is actually loose, you know, kind of like some oak bark or some pine bark, you can actually peek under the bark. Don't pull it off, but you can peek, because lots of insects actually kind of hide behind that bark. In grass, under leaves in particular, especially if they're broad leaves. I spend a lot of time doing this on milkweed, looking for the monarch eggs. Yes.
Okay.
So you got to be willing to get on your hands and knees, crawl around a bit. You know, I don't recommend climbing, but if you've got it in you, you know, you never know. Yeah.
So if we were to find some caterpillar eggs, like what would be the process in being able to you know, take them home?
So I'm so excited that you brought that up. I'm going to talk a little bit right now about iNaturalist. Who knows iNaturalist? Who's used the app iNaturalist? Okay, that's I and then capital N Naturalist. Check out that app, learn how to use it. We actually have a link that we'll share with you that takes you to a page that gives you all the lowdown on how to use iNaturalist, because that is going to help you identify the insect. Once you identify the insect, hopefully you can find the food source. Raising butterflies from nature is very easy if you've got the right food.
Yes.
You can do it. Exactly. So that would be my recommendation, is try to identify it positively, and then hopefully online you can find the food source for that insect.
Okay.
Did that answer your question, Talina?
Yes. I would, you know, I actually wanted to know, like, would we take the leaves? Would they put them in a jar? Would they take them and put them in a net? What would be the process in, you know, just bringing it?
I keep one of these. You can buy them online really easily. They're little net cages for butterflies. They're really the best because these guys need a lot of air ventilation. So the nets and you know, based on the size, you want to get one that's big enough, because they'll crawl around and then they'll even hang their chrysalis in the top of it. Yeah.
Go ahead, Infinite.
Okay, I'm trying to be humble because I know it's after 12 and I'll be able to hear. But it's all right. So, okay, I'm excited. So first of all, I love telling my story. I'll make it quick though. In 3rd grade was my first time releasing butterflies. And Talima, as a homeschool mom, I'm a little removed, but hopefully we get back to it. I always wanted to do it with my children and I didn't get the chance to. So I am loving the fact that I'm able to actualize something I've been wanting to do with you guys. So I know that when we buy these butterfly cages, like they come with the kit, right? So can I show you something really quick? Because if this works, it's a cheaper version. 2 seconds, if y'all don't mind, it's right here. Because I'm like, this may work.
While Infinite is grabbing that, I'm just going to do a quick plug for our next day. April 19th, we'll be coming back together to talk about building pollinator habitats. So for those that are really interested in learning how to build a habitat or protect habitats, the next conversation on the 19th is all about that. And I am putting in the chat right now all of the links for the upcoming series. I encourage you to register.
Okay.
Yes. So here it is. So this is it looks like a big version of a cage to me, but it's just a hamper from IKEA. So every time I see them, I get them for my boys because they remind me of 3rd grade. So it's personal. But I'm like, man, imagine a bunch of So maybe I'll bring one in, Nathan, or we could look at it. But I'm like, I think this may be fine.
You just want to make sure, Infinite, that the
it's an
so
enclosure.
the caterpillars are going, when they form their chrysalis, they're going to have to hang. And I'm not sure they can hang from the net. So you'll want to include like either some twigs that you secure at the top or something that's solid that the caterpillar can hang from once it metamorphoses into a chrysalis.
This can be a project. I love this.
Yes. But I do too. I love it. I love DIY, like make it happen, you know. That's amazing.
Well, I'm calling on all of you, but okay. No.
So folks, I'm going to quickly, because I'm going to have to dash soon, but I want to, is that okay, Nathan, if I share my screen one more time? I just want to make sure that I share some really wonderful resources with you, and I can send these around. The highlighted ones will help you learn more about plants. And then of course, there are some here, the Bee Conservancy or butterfliesandmoths.org. I'm very happy to share this list, but these are ways to learn more about these insects. If you want to buy some plants, I have some recommendations for that I'm happy to share. Just let Nathan know. If you want some native plants yourself for your space, for your public space, a community garden, a park, or a school garden, check out the Butterfly Project New York City Native Plant Share. You can get the registration link. Hopefully, Nathan, I can give you that to share, but also on the Bronx Green Up's website of the New York Botanic Garden. Bronx Green Up is our big partner in this event. And then join a citizen science group. Check out iNaturalist. Participate in the upcoming City Nature Challenge. Teachers, this is a super fun thing to do with your students, the City Nature Challenge using iNaturalist. Or join us for Pollinator Week in June. And we also have the Monarch Festival coming up at Brooklyn Bridge Park on October 1st. So that is it, everybody. And I'm going to stop sharing there. I also have some books if you want those. That's a long list, but yeah. So I am going to dash. I have to go to my next meeting, but I just want to say thank you so much, Nathan, Talima, Infinite, everybody that's here, all of you guys. This has been so much fun. It really totally lifts me way up here. My day is just so amazing. So thank you. And I hope we'll see each other soon out in the parks and the gardens.
Definitely.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, Leo.
Thank you all.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
I'll share all those links. No worries, folks.
Thank you. It's a lot, I know.
Bye, y'all.